Helldivers 2 is not dead. Yet. Let me explain. The community is in the worst state it's ever been. We are basically in a civil war. On one side, we've got those that hate the balancing decisions and the direction the game is going, and don't think the game is as fun as it used to be. Then, on the other side, we've got those that don't really care and are still enjoying the game. If you ask me, both sides have very valid points, and Arrowhead needs to listen to both crowds. The current CEO even brought this up, saying that they want to make as many players happy as possible, but they acknowledge there's a difference between the 3-hour per week casual players and the 30 hours per week difficulty 10 crowd. So my position in this whole conflict is somewhere in the middle. I think the game is a lot less fun than it was in the past, but I don't think it's solely because of balancing alone. It's a mix of a lot of things. So I say that Helldivers 2 is not dead yet, because I truly believe if the game continued down this same path, it won't last. And that isn't to say that it's going to be dead within 3 months, 6 months, or even a year, but there is a reason that the game has lost over 80% of its players in just 6 months. Yes, of course, there is the expected drop-off of people who move on to the next flavor of the week, but for a live service game, this drop-off is largely unheard of. You cannot look at the Helldivers 2 player charts graph and tell me there's nothing wrong. Even if you still love the game, there is something wrong. You can't deny that. If everything was fine, the Steam chart would not look like this and the community would not be in a civil war. I don't take pride in sitting here and bashing a game that I've built my entire YouTube channel on, but I don't really consider it bashing. I think what I've put together here is legitimate criticisms of the game, and again, I'm not talking about strictly balancing. While that is the easiest thing to criticize, it is not the only thing that is contributing to myself and many players feeling like this game just hasn't lived up to the potential it should be living up to. I love this game, and I won't be quitting anytime soon, but the point I'm trying to make is that I just can't see how this game will survive in the long term if it continues down this path. This video will contain all of the aspects that I think are wrong with Helldivers 2 and how to fix them. My name is Easy, thank you for tuning in, let's talk about this. So, I know I just explained that balancing isn't the only problem with Helldivers 2, but it is a problem. It is the main reason the community is essentially in a civil war. I won't run through the entire history of balancing changes in this game, because at this point, they span over the last 6 months. But long story short is that Arrowhead has done a lot more nerfing than buffing. At face value, I don't think there is anything really wrong with that. Like I said, I'm somewhat in the middle between both crowds. I think if a weapon is genuinely broken, it should be nerfed, no matter what the game is. For example, the latest nerf to the Breaker Incendiary was pretty deserved, at least in comparison to other weapons in the game. But while the Breaker Incendiary did deserve the nerf, I would argue it was one of the very few weapons in the game that are actually fun, unique, and gave you the power trip you were looking for. When I look at the primary weapons list, I don't find any other weapons that make me feel like the Breaker Incendiary did, which was overpowered. And according to the game description and marketing, this is one of the core pillars to the game. You'll have access to a wide array of explosive firepower, life-saving armor, and battle-changing stratagems. Even on the box for the game, it says, "Spread democracy with overpowered weapons."
So that was a fucking lie.
If it were up to me, I would have left the Breaker Incendiary as is and buffed other weapons to be on its level. Then, if things got a little too easy for the player, they could find other ways to make the game more difficult. And I know a lot of people would not agree with this philosophy of buff everything. A ton of people think that this game should be difficult and that players should just turn down the difficulty. Again, I'm somewhere in the middle. I want the game to be challenging in some aspects, but I also want it to just be fun and give me the power trip that I'm looking for with my overpowered weapons. Unfortunately, I think we are far away from having overpowered weapons, and that simply makes the weapons not fun. I look at the Helldiver arsenal, and I don't see fun weapons anymore. Two weapons that immediately come to mind that used to be fun are the Railgun and Eruptor, both of which have lost their identities. They are, quite literally, removing the fun, which current creative officer Pillisted acknowledged and agreed with more than 3 months ago now, and they are still seemingly going down this path of removing the fun with the latest update. And don't even get me started on the flamethrower. That thing got completely gutted. I am not going to rant about it or any other individual nerfs in this video. You can find that anywhere else on the internet. I'd rather focus on the overall direction and philosophy. First, I just have to say that I think people who say that players are just suffering from a skill issue or that the game needs to be some hardcore challenge at high difficulties are just straight up cringe. And I don't say that in some unironic meme way to be funny. I actually feel embarrassment for you guys when you say shit like that. It is kind of just sad.
What an idiot! Oh, what a loser!
My gaming history is almost exclusively competitive gaming. I've played an ungodly amount of those types of games: League of Legends, Apex, Overwatch, CS, Valorant, you name it, I have put hundreds of hours into it. So as someone who loves the hardcore try-hard gaming scene, people who sit here in this community and get an ego off their Helldivers 2 skills or claim that everyone else sucks and the balancing is actually good just rubs me the wrong way. If you want a hardcore gaming challenge, you can find that at many other places. I don't think a horde shooter should be the place you find it, and I don't think people purchase this game under the assumption that they'd be playing a runaway kite simulator. We don't want to be running away from enemies and manipulating their AI the entire game. We want to be killing enemies, and we want to do it in fun ways. Right now, I am not getting the fantasy of being Super Earth's most elite soldier, and I think that is the core problem with balancing. It's not that the game is too hard now, far from it. It's that it's no longer fun. I can go load up a difficulty 10 right now and beat it with the worst weapon in the game, no problem. But will I have fun doing it? Hell no. In a PvE horde shooter like this, it is unique, overpowered, and fun to use weapons that make us enjoy the game. I am tired of running away from enemies and permanently kiting them while I wait for my anti-tank stratagems to be off cooldown. That is not a fun way to play the game. To be clear, I am not asking to be a space marine here. I am totally cool if I get one shot by a bug that gets on top of me, but I want to be able to do that back to them at large scales. I want to hold an overpowered weapon in my hand and hold down the trigger while I spray down everything in my path. That is the fantasy that I want, and I think a lot of people would agree. My point here is that I think most weapons just straight up aren't fun, and that is because of the balancing. They aren't even terrible. I think 99% of weapons are viable in this game, but that doesn't make them fun. I think giving them actual meaningful buffs is a good way to remedy this problem. And just because weapons could be overpowered doesn't make the game easy. Go look at a game like COD Zombies, which is obviously in an entirely different genre, but it's also a PvE horde shooter meant to be difficult. Weapons in that game, like the Thunder Gun or Wonderwaff, literally one-shot the enemy, and the game still isn't too easy. The same can be said for a game like Doom, which is again a different genre, but they managed to make their weapons overpowered and unique while also maintaining the difficulty of the game, and I think Helldivers can do the same, especially because we already get one shot as is. I totally understand that the whole joke of Super Earth is that we're playing as useless soldiers that have 20 minutes of training, but I've always been under the assumption that part of the joke is that as useless soldiers, we are equipped with multi-million-dollar gear that we are not fit to handle, which explains why we get one shot by everything, but can also cause immense destruction before that happens. The best solution, in my mind, is to put fun over difficulty. The weapons in this game need to be fun. Right now, I don't think they are. Arrowhead needs to stop prioritizing trying to achieve a perfect balance of difficulty and just make our weapons fun again. Then, after we're having fun, they can go back to the drawing board and find other ways to make the game hard on us. Giving us terrible gear isn't the way to do it. All it does is make people not want to play. What is the gameplay loop of Helldivers 2? In the simplest way to put it, you pick a planet, pick a mission, pick a loadout, shoot aliens, extract, and repeat. It is a very simple gameplay loop, but that's what's appealing about it in the first place, and what will keep you coming back for more. Until you've done this same loop hundreds of times, and normally that would be okay. At a certain point in every game, especially live service games, you are basically doing the same thing over and over. But what makes you want to keep doing it after the 100th time is meaningful progression. Helldivers 2 has progression up until about level 25, where you unlock your last stratagem. And after that, it is just you and the gameplay loop, with pretty much nothing else to unlock and nothing else to do. And that is the real problem with Helldivers 2, if you ask me. I think the game gets incredibly stale much faster than most games do because late game progression is essentially non-existent. At a certain point, you will start to realize that you have nothing else to unlock and there's nothing else to do besides kill more enemies. And this is where the burnout begins, and the true reason why the game has lost over 80% of its players. Personally, I've witnessed my friends up and quit the game and never express wanting to come back. It was never about balancing for them. They just simply got bored one day, stopped playing, and uninstalled. All because they were tired of doing the same thing over and over for seemingly no reward. And sure, killing enemies is fun. That's why we love this game in the first place, because the gameplay is fun. But no matter how fun the gameplay is, there is literally only so many times you can do the same thing over and over until you want to experience something different. And without meaningful progression, you won't experience anything new until Arrowhead decides to update the game. And no matter what you think, it shouldn't be this way. Any 100% complete game needs to have late game progression. Players shouldn't have to take a break until the next major update. If a player is committed enough to want to keep grinding and playing between the major content drops, there needs to be something in it for them to stay. Right now, there isn't. And I think for a live service game, there is a surprising amount of no progression. Like, live service games make money by keeping people around for years on end. This game's not going to have players for years on end if there's nothing for them to do after level 25. Like, sure, killing bugs is fun, but it's only fun so many times. You need something else to unlock, and you need something else to do. Take, for example, Deep Rock Galactic, where you can promote or prestige your characters after 25 levels, which, like Call of Duty, resets their level but gives you brand new perks, cosmetics, and more endgame content. Alongside promoting, there are also overclocks, which are special mods and attachments for your weapons that drastically change how they function. To unlock overclocks, you need matrix cores, and to get a matrix core, you have to play the hardest and most challenging missions in the game, and you can only get 9 of them per week, giving players an incentive to hop back on the game every single week to attempt getting their matrix cores and further upgrading their characters. If character upgrades aren't enough, there are also cosmetic rewards for the most dedicated dwarves on the game, and I can go on and on. Do you see what I'm getting at here? Deep Rock technically isn't a live service game, but it has all the endgame content that is required from a live service game. All Helldivers 2 has in terms of endgame content is modules, and the only reason this is technically a late game content piece is because they take so goddamn long to unlock. The issue is that these modules don't really change the game too much because they are very small buffs that progressively add up together to eventually make a difference. But in the player's mind, every time they buy a module, they're getting a very small and likely not noticeable buff. On top of this, modules are almost entirely numbers based, so it's not like Deep Rock where your long-term commitment to the game gets you a new powerful toy to bring into your next mission. No. Some examples of modules are decreases backpack cooldown by 10%, or a 1-second reduction in call-in time. Super exciting, I guess. The worst part is that you are constantly reminded that you are playing for no rewards, because every time a personal or major order is complete, you get a pop-up saying, "Congrats, here are your 0 medal rewards because you are maxed out." Point is, I do not think Helldivers 2 has any meaningful late game progression to offer, so besides content updates, which I promise we'll get to, the only reason a player would continue playing the game is quite literally because they like the gameplay loop so much of killing enemies over and over. But again, even for a major Helldivers fan like myself, this eventually gets old, and you start wanting something new to do or something to unlock. In my head, there are 2 solutions here. One, which is my preferred and the better solution, is to add some late game stuff for players to do. This can come in many forms, ranging from long to short development time. On the longer side of things, they could finally add the attachment system that everyone has been wanting since day one. This is something that was in the original Helldivers, but honestly, I don't really think Helldivers 2 is built for it. It is fun to imagine though. Just picture a world where you can use requisition slips or medals to add attachments to your weapons, like different scopes, bigger mags, stocks, laser sights, suppressors, or even camos. The list of attachment options are endless, but again, I don't really think Helldivers 2 is built for this, considering a lot of new weapons are basically reskins with attachments. Another option we could get is a resource sink, which is basically just a way to permanently spend the resources that we gather, because most players are entirely maxed out on them. I don't love this option because it's not that great of a progression system, but still, the sink could be something like cosmetics for our ship, weapon armor, or even some way to impact the galactic war. For example, we could spend samples or war bonds to bolster the defenses of a planet by a very small percentage. Another thing I would love to see is if they expanded the personal orders system into a fully fledged personal mission list, where we could complete different challenges and achievements to unlock various items, titles, or even more resources. Hell, I would even be happy with just some late game cosmetics. Literally anything to spend our resources on would be very much appreciated and would actually give late game players something to work toward. Because like I said, right now, there is basically nothing. And despite how great the game loop is, killing the same enemies over and over is only fun for so long. But remember, I did say there was a second way to make players want to keep coming back. It isn't directly related to late game progression, but it does change things up and keep the game fresh, which is just as good, if not better, than having a super deep late game progression system. As you could tell by my super high quality title card, I am talking about the live service elements of Helldivers 2. aka new content and patches. I've already yapped about balance, which is a big part of a live service game, but the other piece of that pie is content, which is where the money is made, where players flood back to the game in droves to experience a new element to the gameplay loop and purchase the new items that are added. I know what you may be thinking. Well, easy. Don't they already do this? How is the late game progression a problem when they constantly add content to the game? And I would answer, yes, dear viewer, they do. But that doesn't mean the content is good or enough. The perfect example for my point here is in the newest update, Escalation of Freedom, which was, in Arrowhead's words,
"It's our first step out of many, where we're gonna expand the game in big, meaningful ways.
New game modes, new objectives, new enemies, and even a whole new difficulty."
Unfortunately, I do not think Escalation of Freedom hit the mark. It does not feel like the first major content update that we're going to be getting. And I'm not even referencing the balancing when I talk about this. I am strictly talking about content. Most of the content in this update are just side grades or reskins to things that already exist in the game. It's easier to explain if I just run through the entire update. So firstly, we get difficulty 10. There are undoubtedly more enemies, it seems like bug breaches last longer, and automaton dropships come in bigger bunches. On top of this, there are also mega bases. It seems that in this game, difficulties really only change the types of enemies that spawn, plus how many enemies there are in general. And difficulty 10 is noticeably different from 9 in that aspect. However, we do have to talk about mega bases, which were a major letdown for me. When Arrowhead first revealed mega bases, my first worry was that if they didn't do anything to change these bases besides the size, it wouldn't actually be much different from fighting in any normal base. And this is exactly how it is. There are more enemies, but it is no different from any other base in the sense that you can just drop a bunch of airstrikes and orbitals in the base, clear 85% of it out, then go in on foot and finish it off. I like that mega bases exist, but I wish they were actually different. On the automaton front, they should feature some new buildings, or some new types of turrets, or even some traps that Helldivers could walk into. Something different. At minimum, I wish stratagem jammers could spawn on these mega bases, because I think that would actually make them a bit more fun and unique. My first thought when seeing the reveal of the mega base was, oh, that's so sick, we're gonna be able to go FBI style as a squad of 4 and raid the mega base. No. The case is usually 1 or 2 guys go off on their own, nuke the hell out of it, and move on. At least the stratagem jammer would prevent that from happening and actually make it a challenge on the map. Anyway, I think the fact that mega bases are basically just normal bases but bigger is a shining example of the type of content that typically gets added to this game. Let's stray away from the Escalation of Freedom for a second and go look at the Terminids. What enemies have they added since launch? The Shriekers are an amazing addition. Love that they made it in. A fantastic way to spice things up. But after that, it seems that they lost all creativity or will to introduce anything unique or new. The next enemy added after that was the Charger Behemoth, who was technically in the game, but was an objective spawn on lower difficulties. But anyway, the Behemoth was added to higher difficulties and now takes the place of normal Chargers. As many of you know, they are basically just Chargers, but with heavier armor. Instead of 1 anti-tank shot, they now take 2. So the Charger Behemoth is basically just a reskin of the normal Charger to artificially give them more health. Then we get back to the Escalation of Freedom, where we've got the Spore Charger, another reskin of the Charger, which is just a normal Charger but has a cloud of spores to make it hard to see. It is a fun challenge, but again, it's literally just the 3rd reskin of an enemy we already have. We've also got the Alpha Commander, our 3rd reskinned enemy edition. This is just a Brood Commander with some slightly different color shades and some added textures. Much like the Behemoth, it is just a buffed up and tankier version of its predecessor. Can you see where I'm going with this? A lot of the content that gets added isn't really all too new. It does give you 1 or 2 games of excitement when seeing these enemies for the first time, but after that, it's just back to normalcy, like you're fighting the same enemies that you've always been fighting, except now they have a health buff or some new gimmick. The same thing can be seen on the automaton front with the new addition of the Rocket Tank and Rocket Strider. The Rocket Tank is our 3rd tank variant, and the Rocket Strider is just a Scout Strider with some rockets slapped on the side. This is why content gets old so quickly, because while they do add a good amount of it, none of it actually feels new or really adds anything different to the game. When you come across a Spore Charger, you fight it exactly like a normal Charger. When you see Rocket Tank, you fight it exactly like any of the other tanks. But I have to give credit where it's due. The Impaler is an awesome addition. That is what new enemy additions should be like. I know a lot of people have complaints about the ragdolling and how buggy the enemy is to fight, but I don't care too much about that, at least not right now. I think the Impaler is a successful enemy addition. Most importantly, it adds a new challenge and a new dynamic to the gameplay, something that cannot be said for many of the other previous enemy additions. We also get a new biome, the Dark Swamp, which is literally the normal swamp biome, but with reskinned darker trees and a black skybox with lightning in the background. This new biome looks cool, but it is not new, nor does it present any new gameplay challenges. It doesn't even come with a new environmental hazard. It all feels like the same thing we've been playing for a long time. But reskinned enemy additions and content are just one piece of the puzzle. Another and potentially much larger issue when it comes to content is that a lot of it just feels half-baked and not finished. For example, we get the Airburst rocket launcher, and on release, it was literally unusable. The gun pretty much only served to kill you and your teammates. Granted, they did fix the weapon within a few days, but still, this happens a lot, and most content isn't lucky enough to get fixes so fast. Remember when the heavy machine gun came out and it was a D-tier stratagem that nobody wanted to use for basically 2 months until they buffed it? How about exosuits, which are both incredibly underpowered and have the jankiest aiming systems in gaming? The bullets literally don't go where you want them to go. It sucks. Or when tier 4 modules dropped and 2 of them were bugged and a third didn't even work. Or how about when Polar Patriots was released, a winter-themed warbond that featured nothing winter-related and had the most dogshit weapons in the game. Or when Democratic Detonation released and they nerfed the fan-favorite Eruptor within 2 weeks. Remember when they released a fire-themed warbond 2 days after nerfing flame damage? Oh right, that literally just happened. I won't continue down the list of examples because there are many. I'm sure you're even thinking of some now, but I believe my point is made. Even when new content comes out, a lot of the time it feels terrible to use, doesn't work properly, or sometimes doesn't even work at all. Sure, all of the stuff I said eventually got fixed, but second chances are hard to come by with gamers, and I think a lot of people aren't willing to give new content a chance and have already completely quit the game based on Arrowhead's track record. By the way, I think this is evident with the player numbers when Escalation of Freedom released. That was supposed to be Helldivers 2's first major content update, the thing that started to bring players back, but it didn't even double in concurrent players. Meanwhile, a game like Deep Rock Galactic had its major update of 2024 and hit its all-time peak in 6 years. So, to recap, I think most of the content that comes out in this game is just reskinned stuff that we already have and doesn't actually add anything new to the core gameplay. Another chunk of content that comes out is just half-baked, doesn't work, or straight up sucks and isn't fun. Then there is a small bit of content that is actually good. So, what's our solution here? Well, let's take a look at the content that is good and just do more of that. Immediately, what comes to mind are automaton gunships, shriekers, factory striders, and impalers. Not only are all 4 of these enemies unique and not reskins of old content, but they all have something else in common. They all add a new element and challenge to gameplay. Hear me out. Gunships and shriekers both add verticality to the game, requiring players to, well, look up when fighting. Then we got the Factory Strider, which acted as the closest thing we have to a boss tier unit. It essentially locks down an entire area of the map until your team can work together to take it down. And the Impaler also has a similar effect, but rather than locking down specific areas, it is the only bug enemy that can truly cut off your path against bugs. As mentioned, running and kiting is the name of the game against Terminids, and once you're good enough, you can basically just train them around like COD zombies. But the Impaler sees the path that you're on and will shut you down. It will either force you to change directions or take a gamble as you run through its tentacles and risk getting one-shot. This is what new content additions for enemies needs to look like, not just adding reskinned enemies for the sake of adding stuff. Additions should have intention and purpose, something that all 4 of those enemies very clearly do. Then when it comes to warbond and stratagem drops, the only way to put it is do better. When new gear comes out, it needs to not only work, but it needs to feel good and feel like it is worth the player's time to get on and try it out. One example of this is the Quasar Cannon. That was a weapon that was worth getting on and trying out when it released. Of course, it later got nerfed, but still, the point is there. When new content comes out in this game, no matter what it is, it needs to work, needs to be good, and it needs to be unique and provide us with new gameplay experiences. No more reskins, no more terrible warbonds, and no more stratagems that don't work. I know somebody is already typing it in the comments because I see it every time I talk about this, but I'll tell the joke for you. Of course there are bugs in Helldivers 2. Obviously, I am not talking about the Terminids. I am talking about bugs and glitches. However, I named this section Performance because I actually think Arrowhead did a fantastic job at fixing a lot of the things wrong with this game in the update, at least when it comes to bugs and glitches. It has been a long time since I've experienced a bug or glitch-free game of Helldivers 2. It maybe has never happened until now. Or at least we're as close as ever. Sure, there are still bugs here and there, but I can actually go full missions without even noticing a bug. So that is huge progress. Instead of talking about bugs that still remain in the game, the bigger issue at this point is the performance of Helldivers 2. I have literally, and I'm not exaggerating, I mean this, never seen a game drop this badly in performance in just 6 months. Personally speaking, it is very rare to go a full game without a significant frame drop at least once. And when I mean significant, I mean sub 40 frames. Not that that is unplayable, but still, it should not be happening. Even worse, I used to run this game at max graphics above 100 frames very consistently. Now I hover around 65 to 70, even on the lowest graphics. Weirdly enough, it seems like changing your graphics has almost no effect on performance, at least for me. I can run at all low graphics and get 70 frames, or run at ultra and also get 70 frames. There seems to be no correlation. And I can only speak on my own experiences and from what I read online. And what I read is not good. There are a few people in my Discord who say they get such low frames that they can't even play on the new difficulty. That might be a hardware issue, but still, people on high-end PCs are experiencing performance drops, and that should not be happening. Even people on PlayStation 5 in performance mode are getting sub 60 frame drops, which is just unacceptable, to be honest. If Helldivers 2 had this state of performance when the game released, I think there would be grounds for a mass refund, at least on Steam, because this game's current performance is not at all in line for what most players should be getting relative to their hardware. The only solution is to fix it. I think this should be a major priority, in fact, maybe even priority 1, as performance can deter even those who absolutely adore the game. So this is something that needs to be addressed ASAP. Alright, now that all of my major criticisms are laid out on the field, the game is not dead. Not yet. There is still time to save this thing and bring glory to Super Earth, but the margin for error is getting thinner. Time is running out, and the community has no trust in Arrowhead. There are only so many times they can screw up and say, sorry, we'll do better in the future. Personally speaking, I am not inclined to believe anything they say at the moment. There has been lots promised and lots said that has never come true. Recently, Arrowhead released a message to the community, which stated that they didn't hit their target with the latest update and have been reflecting on feedback. They say within the next 60 days, they will re-examine balancing, update the fire mechanic, prevent excessive ragdolling, rethink primary weapon design, improve frame rate, and rework chargers. Many of my main criticisms would be addressed directly if these things came true, but in their own words, what matters now is action, not talk. And to this point, they have honestly been all talk. So the ball is once again in the developer's court. The only one that can turn this ship around is Arrowhead themselves. They can win back player trust, reunite the community, and keep this game alive for many years to come. But it all depends on how, or if, they turn things around. My name's been Easy, thanks for watching. I promise this channel isn't all complaining, so if you want to subscribe, that'd be pretty awesome. Anyway, I've got some fun videos lined up, both Helldivers and non-Helldivers related, so if you liked this video, you'll probably like those. Hope to see you stick around. Thanks for watching till the end. Take care of yourself. See ya!